The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched before Ambassador Jack Morrison like a cathedral made of light and crystal. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back as alien voices echoed from the curved walls above. Dr. Lisa Carter adjusted her datapad nervously beside him while Commander Ryan Walsh kept his eyes fixed on the 12 towering figures that sat in judgment over humanity. The Zephyrian Chancellor rose from his crystalline throne and his voice rang through the chamber like breaking glass. Earth delegation, you stand accused of violations most severe against the laws that govern civilized space. His forearms gestured toward the floating displays that showed images of destroyed ships and burning stations. The evidence speaks clearly of human aggression and disregard for peaceful coexistence. Morrison felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice steady when he spoke. Honored Chancellor, we came here in good faith to answer these charges, but what we see is a predetermined conclusion. He gestured toward the prosecution table where the Serpentine Kronak representative, Sethkar, coiled around his speaking platform. We request the right to present our own evidence. The Aquarian representative rippled her translucent blue form and spoke in tones like ocean waves. The Council has reviewed all evidence, Ambassador Morrison, and found human actions to be inexcusable. Her large eyes fixed on the human delegation with what might have been sadness. Your species shows too much violence and too little wisdom for galactic society. Dr. Carter stepped forward and activated her holographic display. If I may present the scientific data from the Valtar Research Station. The air filled with three-dimensional images showing weapon designs and illegal experiments. These files prove they were developing planet-killing weapons in violation of 12 different galactic treaties. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. The station was located only 3 light-years from our colony of New Boston with a population of 2 million civilians. The Veltar representative hissed through his breathing apparatus and his purple skin darkened with anger. Lies and fabrications, he spat. Humans destroyed our peaceful research facility without warning or provocation. Commander Walsh stepped forward and his military bearing commanded attention even from the alien council members. The station fired first, he said simply. Our patrol ship, the Earth Defender, was conducting routine border surveillance when Veltar ships opened fire without communication or warning. He activated his own display showing combat recordings. Captain Helen Rodriguez followed standard defensive protocols and only returned fire when her ship took damage. Morrison watched the faces of the council members as they absorbed this information, but he could see their minds were already made up. The Kronak prosecutor Sethkar uncoiled himself, and his scales gleamed under the chamber lights. Even if we accept human explanations for this incident, there remains the pattern of aggressive expansion and militaristic behavior. Images flashed showing human colony ships and military vessels. In 50 years, humans have established 300 colonies and built the largest fleet in known space. The Chancellor nodded slowly and Morrison felt hope slipping away like sand through his fingers. The evidence supports the prosecutor's claims about human nature, the crystalline being announced. Your species expands too quickly and builds too many weapons. He paused, and the chamber fell silent except for the hum of the station's life support systems. The Council finds that humanity poses a clear threat to galactic peace and stability. Dr. Carter grabbed Morrison's arm and whispered urgently, Tell them about the trade agreements and the medical aid we've provided. But Morrison shook his head, knowing it was too late for such arguments. The Aquarian representative spoke again, and her voice carried the weight of finality. After careful deliberation, the Council of 12 renders its unanimous verdict. She rose from her seat, and the other council members followed her example. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council and banned from entering any council-protected space. The words hit Morrison like physical blows. All human colonies and vessels have 30 standard days to withdraw beyond the designated boundary markers. Morrison felt the blood drain from his face, but he forced himself to stand straight. Commander Walsh's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm before he caught himself and let his arm drop. Dr. Carter stared at the council members in disbelief, her scientific mind struggling to process such an illogical decision. Security guards in gleaming armor stepped forward to escort the human delegation from the chamber, but Morrison held up his hand. "Before we leave, I want the council to hear one thing clearly." His voice carried across the vast space, and even the alien representatives leaned forward to listen. "You are making the greatest mistake in galactic history." He looked each council member in the eye. "Humanity has always been at its best when faced with impossible odds, and you have just given us the greatest challenge we have ever known." The Chancellor waved dismissively with two of his four arms. "Empty human bravado will not change our decision, Ambassador Morrison." But something in Morrison's tone seemed to give him pause. Morrison smiled grimly as the guards moved to flank him. "You may banish us from your council, but you cannot banish the human spirit." His voice rose until it echoed from the crystal walls. "We will remember this day, and we will remember every face in this chamber." He turned to leave, then looked back over his shoulder. "And someday when the galaxy looks very different, you will remember it too." The great doors sealed behind them with a sound like thunder. Captain Helen Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the deep space vessel USS Horizon and watched the greatest migration in human history unfold before her eyes. 6 months had passed since the Council's verdict, and now thousands of ships filled the space around the border stations, carrying everything humanity could salvage from their former homes. The evacuation convoy stretched for millions of kilometers in every direction like a river of lights flowing toward the unknown. Admiral Frank Gibson's voice crackled through the communication system from his flagship Defiance. "All vessels maintain formation and stay within the designated corridors," he commanded. "Council enforcement ships are monitoring our withdrawal, and any deviation will be met with force." Rodriguez could hear the frustration in the Admiral's voice even through the static on the lower deck. Dr. Paul Stevens worked frantically to catalog the plant and animal samples they were taking from the abandoned colonies. His team had only days to gather specimens that represented decades of terraforming work on worlds like New Boston and Liberty Station. Each sample might be the key to survival in whatever hostile environment awaited them beyond the galactic rim. The colony ship New Eden drifted past Rodriguez's viewport, and she could see the faces pressed against the observation windows. Captain Susan Brooks commanded 50,000 refugees aboard that single vessel, including families who had lived on Council worlds for 3 generations. Engineer Tony Martinez worked around the clock to keep the aging ship systems running as they pushed toward star charts that simply ended in blank space. Young Emma Davis pressed her nose against the cold glass of the New Eden's observation deck while her brother Jake played with a toy spaceship nearby. Their parents had told them they were going on an adventure, but Emma was old enough to understand that they were leaving everything behind forever. She watched the stars change from familiar constellations to patterns no human had ever mapped. Rodriguez received an encrypted message from Captain Billy Chun, who had chosen to remain in Council space as an exile. "The Council is already moving their own people into our former colonies," his transmission reported. "They're treating our worlds like conquered territory and erasing any trace that humans ever lived there." The message cut off abruptly, and Rodriguez knew Chun was taking enormous risks to send even that much information. The convoy's route took them past the planet Kepler 442b, where they had discovered something that changed everything. Dr. Rachel Stone led the archaeological team that had found ruins buried beneath the planet's northern ice cap. The structures were clearly ancient, but built with technology that seemed more advanced than anything the Council possessed. Rodriguez joined Stone's team on the planet's surface, where they worked to excavate artifacts before the withdrawal deadline. The ruins stretched for kilometers underground, and the walls were covered with symbols that no known species used. "These buildings are at least 10,000 years old," Stone explained as they descended into the main chamber. "But look at this power conduit still carrying energy after all this time." The artifacts they discovered defied explanation. Crystalline computers that responded to human touch, weapon designs that incorporated principles unknown to modern science, and star charts showing regions of space that appeared on no Council maps. Most intriguing was a massive ring-shaped structure buried deepest in the complex that Stone's team identified as some kind of transportation device. The energy readings are off the charts, reported Stone's assistant Dr. Marcus Webb as he ran his scanners over the ring. Whatever this thing is, it's still active and waiting for something. The ring was covered in the same symbols they had found throughout the ruins, but these seemed to pulse with faint light when humans approached. Admiral Gibson arrived on the planet just hours before the final evacuation deadline to see the discovery for himself. He stood in the ancient chamber with Rodriguez and Stone examining the alien technology that might hold the key to humanity's survival. "Can we move any of this?" he asked, but Stone shook her head. "The power systems are integrated into the planet's core," she explained. "But we've recorded everything and taken samples of the smaller artifacts." She handed him a crystal device that hummed with energy when he touched it. "These items seem to respond to human neural patterns in ways we don't understand." The final ships lifted off from Kepler 442b, carrying crates of alien artifacts and data crystals filled with scanned information about the ruins. Rodriguez watched the planet shrink behind them, knowing they might never return to uncover all its secrets. But the discovery had planted a seed of hope that there might be more waiting for them in the unexplored regions beyond. Council space. As the last human vessels crossed the boundary, Marker's Admiral Gibson transmitted a message to every ship in the convoy. "Today we leave behind the galaxy that rejected us, but we do not leave empty-handed." His voice carried across the fleet channels. "We carry with us the greatest treasure of all, which is the knowledge that we are not alone in our struggle against those who would limit our potential." Rodriguez watched the boundary markers fade behind them on her sensors and felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Ahead lay nothing but empty space and distant stars that no human had ever visited. Behind them, the Council fleets maintained their positions like guards, making sure the exiles never returned. Captain Brooks reported from the New Eden that morale remained surprisingly high among the refugees despite the uncertainty ahead. Children like Emma and Jake had adapted quickly to life aboard ship and were already learning to navigate by the new star patterns they encountered. The adults worked together with a determination that impressed even the ship's officers. The convoy pushed deeper into uncharted space following ancient star charts recovered from the ruins on Kepler 442b. With each passing day, they moved further from everything humanity had ever known, but Rodriguez found herself looking forward rather than back. They were writing the first chapter of a new story, and she intended to make it one worth telling. 3 years had passed since the Great Exodus, and President Kate Williams stood on the observation deck of the new government building on New Terra, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. The planet had become humanity's new capital through necessity rather than choice, but it was proving to be a better home than anyone had dared hope. Rich mineral deposits lay beneath the surface, and the atmosphere required only minor adjustments to support human life. The early years had tested every limit of human endurance and ingenuity. Chief Science Advisor Dr. Alan Foster worked 18-hour days in the laboratories developing new technologies from the artifacts they had recovered from Kepler 442b. His team had successfully reverse-engineered several alien devices, including power cells that lasted 10 times longer than anything humanity had previously built. General Pete Morrison served as military coordinator and spent his days planning the defense of their new territories. He was Jack Morrison's younger brother and carried the same determination that had made his sibling such an effective ambassador. "We cannot afford to be caught unprepared again," he told Williams during their daily briefings. "The Council may have banished us, but they have not forgotten us." Chief Engineer Maria Santos had revolutionized terraforming with techniques that combined human engineering with principles learned from the ancient artifacts. Her teams could now make a planet habitable in months rather than decades by using crystalline devices that accelerated atmospheric processing. The process required careful calibration, but the results exceeded all expectations. Captain Johnny Price commanded the exploration fleet that ventured deeper into uncharted space, searching for resources and potential colony sites. His ship, the Pathfinder, had discovered something remarkable in a system 12 light-years from New Terra. "Madam President, you need to see this for yourself," He transmitted from the bridge after 3 days of investigation. The discovery was a network of ring-shaped structures floating in space around an ancient red giant star. Each ring was identical to the device they had found on Kepler 442b, but these were fully operational and connected by streams of energy that defied current understanding of physics. Dr. Stephen Clark led the science team studying the rings, and his initial reports were almost too incredible to believe. "They appear to be some kind of transportation system," Clark explained to Williams during an emergency cabinet meeting. "Our tests suggest they can move objects instantaneously across vast distances of space." He activated a holographic display showing the ring network extending across dozens of star systems. "If we can learn to operate them, we could establish colonies hundreds of light years apart and maintain instant communication between them." The rings were not the only discovery that changed humanity's prospects. Captain Price's exploration teams encountered other species that had been exiled or forgotten by the galactic community. The first contact came when they investigated a distress signal from a dying ship in an asteroid field near the seventh ring. The ship contained 3 survivors from a species called the Nicarians, who resembled tall, thin humans with silver skin and large, dark eyes. Their leader Zixtal spoke perfect galactic standard and explained that his people had been exiled from Council space over 1,000 years ago for refusing to surrender their technological innovations. "The Council fears progress," he told Williams when she met with him personally. "They prefer stagnation to the risks that come with advancement." More refugees arrived as word spread that humans welcomed exiles and outcasts. Voron of the Altair species had been a Council military officer until he questioned orders to attack civilian targets. His knowledge of Council military tactics proved invaluable to General Morrison's defense planning. The former officer worked closely with human strategists to develop new approaches that combined human adaptability with alien technology. The establishment of permanent colonies required careful planning and enormous resources. Governor Amy Thompson oversaw the development of New Chicago on a world rich in industrial metals and rare earth elements. Her engineers built factories that combined human manufacturing techniques with alien technologies to produce goods that surpassed anything either species could create alone. Administrator Carl Davis managed the mining operations on New Vegas, where teams worked around the clock to extract the materials needed for expansion. The planet's vast mineral wealth included elements that were essential for operating the ring transportation system. Davis coordinated with Santos's terraforming teams to ensure the mining operations did not interfere with making the planet habitable. Colonel Lisa Rodriguez commanded the hidden military base called Sanctuary, where humanity's most advanced weapons and defensive systems were developed. Her teams worked with alien refugees to create technologies that the Council had never seen before. The base was concealed within an asteroid field and protected by stealth systems that made it invisible to conventional sensors. Political tensions arose as humanity struggled to define its new identity. Former Earth Senator Ron Parker led a faction that argued for eventual reconciliation with the Council, believing that isolation would ultimately weaken humanity. "We cannot survive alone in this hostile galaxy," he argued during heated debates in the new Senate. "Eventually, we must find a way to coexist with the established powers." General Sam Wilson represented the opposite viewpoint, advocating for military buildup and eventual revenge against those who had wronged humanity. "They cast us out like criminals," he reminded the Senate during one particularly heated session. "We owe them nothing but the justice they denied us." His supporters included many military officers and colonists who had lost everything during the evacuation. President Williams navigated these competing visions while focusing on the practical work of building a functioning society. The ring network had proven to be the key to rapid expansion, allowing humanity to establish colonies across vast distances and maintain effective communication and supply lines. Each new world brought unique challenges, but also new opportunities for growth and development. Dr. Foster's research teams made breakthrough after breakthrough as they learned to understand and adapt the ancient technologies. Power systems that drew energy directly from stellar radiation, manufacturing techniques that could reshape matter at the molecular level, and communication devices that operated faster than light across unlimited distances. The artifacts were teaching humanity to transcend the limitations that had defined them for centuries. The transformation was remarkable to witness. Within 3 years, humanity had gone from refugees, fleeing into exile, to colonists building an expanding network of thriving worlds. The Terran Republic stretched across 40 star systems and grew stronger, with each passing month as new technologies came online and new allies joined their cause. Captain Roy Barnes gripped the armrests of his command chair as the exploration vessel Pioneer emerged from the dark nebula known as the Veil of Sorrows. 6 months of searching had led his crew to this hidden region where long-range sensors detected artificial structures that defied explanation. The nebula's charged particles made navigation treacherous, but something about the energy signatures they were detecting suggested intelligence far beyond anything humanity had encountered. Dr. Margaret Foster monitored the science stations as strange readings filled her displays with patterns that seemed almost too complex to be natural. She was Alan Foster's daughter and had inherited her father's curiosity about alien technologies, along with a determination to push beyond the boundaries of known science. Captain, these readings suggest massive structures hidden within the nebula itself, she reported. The scale is unlike anything we've seen before. The first sign of contact came when a ship materialized out of the swirling gases ahead of them, moving with grace that seemed to defy physics. The vessel was twice the size of Pioneer and appeared to be made from some kind of living metal that shifted and flowed like liquid mercury. Captain Barnes ordered all weapons powered down and activated the universal translator as the alien ship approached. A voice spoke through their communication system with tones that seemed to resonate directly in their minds rather than through their ears. "Unknown vessels, you travel in sacred space where the forgotten dwell," the voice announced. "State your purpose or face the consequences of trespass." Despite the warning, there was curiosity rather than hostility in the alien's words. Barnes responded carefully, knowing that this moment could determine humanity's future in this region of space. "This is Captain Roy Barnes of the Terran Republic exploration vessel Pioneer," he transmitted. "We are seeking knowledge and allies among those who have been cast out by the galactic powers." He paused, then added, "We ourselves are exiles seeking a new home among the stars." The alien ship circled Pioneer twice before responding, and Barnes could feel his crew's tension as they waited. Dr. Foster worked frantically to analyze the energy signatures coming from the alien vessel, noting technologies that seemed to operate on principles that human science had never discovered. "Their power systems are incredible," she whispered to Barnes. "They're drawing energy directly from the nebula itself." When the response came, it carried a note of surprise that translated clearly through their systems. "Exiles you claim to be, yet you travel with confidence and purpose," the voice observed. "We are the Eritani, and we have hidden in these clouds for 10,000 years since the Council drove us from our worlds." A pause followed. "You will come aboard our vessel and explain how new exiles have found us in our secret places." The docking process revealed the sophistication of Eritani. Technology as their ship created a perfect environmental seal without any physical contact between the vessels. Barnes selected a small team, including Dr. Foster and his security chief lieutenant, Jake Mills, to represent humanity in what could be the most important first contact in their species history. The interior of the Eritani ship challenged every assumption about spacecraft design. Walls curved and flowed like organic structures but were clearly artificial, and the lighting seemed to come from the walls themselves rather than any visible source. Their hosts appeared as tall, graceful beings with skin that shimmered like starlight, and eyes that held depths of knowledge accumulated over millennia. Ancient Speaker Velthara served as their guide, and her voice carried the weight of countless years when she spoke. "Your arrival puzzles us young ones," she said as she led them through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves as they walked. "The Council has not exiled a species for over 3,000 years, preferring instead to simply destroy those who displease them. Her large eyes fixed on Barnes with an intensity that made him feel transparent. What makes humans different that they chose banishment over annihilation? Dr. Foster stepped forward and activated her portable display showing images of the artifacts they had discovered on Kepler 442b. We found ruins and technologies that we believe belong to a species called the Architects, she explained. The artifacts respond to human neural patterns and have taught us things that the Council clearly wanted to remain hidden. Velthara stopped walking, and her expression showed the first emotion they had seen from any Eritani. The Architects, she repeated, and her voice carried reverence mixed with sorrow. We remember them, though we were young when they fell. She gestured for them to follow her into a vast chamber filled with holographic displays showing star charts that covered the entire galaxy. They were the ones who came before the Council and created the transportation network that could have freed all species from the tyranny of distance. The revelation that followed changed everything Barnes thought he knew about galactic history. The Eritani archives contained records going back 50,000 years, telling the story of species after species that had been exiled or destroyed for showing too much independence or developing technologies that threatened Council control. The pattern repeats endlessly, Velthara explained as she showed them historical records. A species develops something new and useful, and the Council either takes it for themselves or destroys those who created it. Through the Eritani, Barnes learned about other forgotten civilizations hiding throughout the galactic rim. The warrior clans of Kardec had been driven from their homeworld for refusing to serve as Council enforcers and now lived as nomads in the space between stars. Warchief Groktar led their scattered fleets in raids against Council shipping while searching for a world they could call home again. The ethereal Lumina had once been the galaxy's greatest artists and philosophers, until the Council decided their ideas were too dangerous for general distribution. They now existed as beings of pure energy hiding in the hearts of dying stars, where their thoughts could not contaminate others with dangerous concepts, like individual freedom and creative expression. Most intriguing were the Nexus Collective, a cybernetic species that had merged biological and artificial intelligence so completely that the Council could not understand where one ended and the other began. Unit Prime served as their primary interface with other species and offered technologies that could revolutionize human civilization if properly understood and applied. President Williams received regular reports from Barnes as he made contact with each new species and began to understand the scope of what they had discovered. The galactic rim was not empty space waiting to be colonized, but rather a hidden civilization of exiles and outcasts who had been building their own society for thousands of years outside Council control. Dr. Foster worked with Eritani scientists to study the ancient records and piece together the true history of the Architect civilization. They had not simply built the transportation network, but had envisioned a galaxy where all species could share knowledge and resources freely without the restrictions imposed by the Council's rigid hierarchy. Their destruction had been systematic and thorough, designed to erase not just their people but their ideas about what galactic civilization could become. The opportunity before humanity was enormous, but so were the risks. Each exiled species had learned to distrust newcomers through bitter experience with betrayal and false promises. Building alliances would require patience and proof that humans were different from those who had come before claiming to offer hope while delivering only disappointment. Barnes found himself serving as humanity's first ambassador to the forgotten civilizations that had survived in the dark spaces between the stars. His reports to President Williams painted a picture of vast potential if they could successfully unite these scattered species under a common cause while avoiding the mistakes that had led to previous failures. The stage was set for something unprecedented in galactic history as humanity began the delicate process of forging alliances with beings who had learned through harsh experience that survival meant trusting no one but themselves. Captain Bobby Martinez stood on the bridge of the heavy cruiser. Vengeance, watching the refugee convoy limp toward the border world of Caldara, with Council pursuit ships gaining steadily behind them. 5 years had passed since the formation of the Rim Alliance, and this was the moment that would test whether their confederation of exiled species could stand against the might of the galactic establishment that had cast them all aside. The refugees were Veltar scientists led by Dr. Talon, who had discovered evidence of war crimes committed by their own government against civilian populations on disputed worlds. When they tried to present their findings to the Council, they were branded as traitors and marked for execution. Their desperate flight had brought them across half the galaxy to seek sanctuary in Rim Alliance space. Commander Sarah Miller monitored the tactical displays as enemy contacts multiplied on her screens. "Captain, I'm reading 20 Council warships in pursuit formation," she reported. "The lead vessel is broadcasting Kronak Imperial Navy identification codes." Her voice remained steady, but Martinez could see the concern in her eyes as she calculated the odds they faced. Admiral Zorthok commanded the Council fleet from his flagship, the Devastator, and his reputation for ruthless efficiency preceded him. Across the galaxy, the Kronak Admiral had built his career on suppressing rebellions and enforcing Council authority with brutal effectiveness. His transmission crackled through Vengeance's communication system with barely contained fury. "Human vessel, you will surrender the traitors immediately and withdraw from this system." Zorthak's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to instant obedience. "Failure to comply will result in the cleansing of this entire region and the elimination of all terrorist sympathizers." The threat was delivered with casual certainty that made Martinez's blood run cold. Engineer Rick Thompson worked frantically in the engine room, pushing their modified architect power systems beyond safe limits to maintain position between the refugees and their pursuers. "Captain, I can give you full power for maybe 30 minutes before the containment fields start to fail," he reported through the intercom. "After that, we'll be running on backup systems and prayer." Martinez activated the fleet communication channel that connected Vengeance with the other ships defending Caldara. 2 Eritani stealth vessels commanded by Captain Silvera provided reconnaissance and electronic warfare support, while a squadron of Kardec fighters led by Wing Commander Torgak prepared for close combat. The mixed fleet represented everything. The Rim Alliance had learned about cooperation between species with vastly different fighting styles. The colony on Caldara held 50,000 civilians, including humans who had chosen to settle on the frontier world despite the dangers. Governor Linda Hayes coordinated the evacuation efforts while maintaining communication with the defensive fleet. "Captain Martinez, we need at least 6 hours to get the non-essential personnel to the underground shelters," she transmitted. "The children and elderly cannot move any faster." Dr. Talon's ship, the Truth Bearer, transmitted constantly as his team worked to upload their evidence to secure servers throughout Alliance space. "The data must survive even if we do not," the Veltar scientist insisted when Martinez offered to evacuate his people. "The galaxy must know what the Council has done to innocent worlds in the name of maintaining order." The first shots came without further warning as Council forces opened fire on the refugee convoy still outside Caldara's defensive perimeter. Martinez watched in horror as 2 transport ships exploded under heavy weapons, fire killing hundreds of civilians who had been seeking nothing more than the chance to tell the truth about their government's crimes. "All ships engage," Martinez ordered as Vengeance surged forward with weapons blazing. The modified human ship moved with speed and agility that surprised the Council forces, who had expected the crude technology of frontier exiles. Architect-enhanced shields deflected enemy fire, while weapon systems that combined human innovation with alien knowledge struck back with devastating effect. Commander Miller coordinated the battle from her position at the tactical station, calling out targeting priorities and fleet movements with the precision of someone who had trained for this moment her entire career. "Eritani vessels execute stealth strike pattern 7, she ordered. "Kardec fighters provide escort for the refugee ships and get them behind our defensive line." The Council fleet's response was swift and brutal as Admiral Zorthak realized. He faced opponents who would not submit to his usual intimidation tactics. The Devastator opened fire with its main weapons targeting the colony's population centers in a deliberate attempt to force surrender through the threat of civilian casualties. Martinez felt rage build in his chest as he watched weapons designed to crack planets being aimed at defenseless families who had committed no crime except existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Lock all weapons on the Devastator," he ordered. "If they want to target civilians, then they can face the consequences." The battle that followed became known throughout the galaxy as the moment when exile species proved they could not only resist Council authority but defeat it decisively. Vengeance and her escorts used tactics developed through years of cooperation between different species combining human adaptability with Eritani, stealth technology and Kardec warrior ferocity. The turning point came when Admiral Zorthak activated what he called his ultimate weapon, a device designed to destabilize planetary cores and cause massive seismic destruction. The weapon had been used on rebellious worlds throughout Council space, and its mere existence violated dozens of galactic treaties that supposedly protected civilian populations. Martinez made a decision that changed galactic history when he activated the Architect defense system that Dr. Foster's teams had discovered in the ruins of Caldara's ancient sites. The alien technology responded to the threat with power that dwarfed anything the Council possessed, creating an energy barrier that not only protected the planet, but reflected the planet killer's destructive force back at its source. The explosion that destroyed the Council's ultimate weapon sent shockwaves through both fleets as everyone realized they had witnessed the deployment of technology that exceeded current galactic understanding. Admiral Zorthak's flagship took critical damage, and 3 Council destroyers were completely destroyed by the feedback from their own weapon. Engineer Thompson's voice came through the intercom with barely controlled excitement as he monitored the power readings from the Architect system. "Captain, that device is still drawing energy from the planet's core and showing no signs of overload," he reported. "Whatever the Architects built here, it's operating at maybe 10% capacity." The surviving Council ships fled the system in disorder, carrying word back to their masters that humanity and its allies possessed weapons that could match or exceed anything in the Council's arsenal. Admiral Zorthak himself survived, but his reputation never recovered from the humiliation of being defeated by the very exiles he had been sent to eliminate. President Williams received reports of the victory with mixed feelings, knowing that the Caldara incident had effectively declared war between the Rim Alliance and the Galactic establishment. General Pete Morrison argued for immediate follow-up strikes while the Council was still reeling, but Dr. Alan Foster warned that they needed time to fully understand the Architect technologies before committing to total war. The decision, ultimately, rested with Williams as she balanced the desires for revenge against the practical needs of their growing civilization. The victory at Caldara had proven that exile species could stand against Council tyranny, but it had also painted a target on every world in Alliance space for retaliation that would surely come. Emperor Jack Morrison stood before the great windows of his palace on Terra, Prime, watching the morning sun rise over a capital city that had grown beyond all imagination in just 2 years since the Council declared their final cleansing campaign. What had begun as the Terran Republic fighting for survival had transformed into something far greater as world after world chose to join the human empire. Rather than face destruction at Council hands, the transformation had been remarkable to witness. Admiral Helen Rodriguez now commanded over 2,000 vessels in the Imperial fleet, including ships from dozens of species that had abandoned the failing Council to serve under human leadership. Her tactical innovations had revolutionized space warfare, combining the best elements of every military tradition in known space into strategies that proved unstoppable against conventional forces. The morning briefing brought news from across the galaxy as Imperial forces continued their advance toward the ancient core worlds that had been the foundation of Council power for millennia. General Lisa Rodriguez reported from the front lines where her ground forces had just completed the liberation of 3 more worlds from Council occupation. The grateful populations welcomed Imperial troops as liberators rather than conquerors. Minister Diana Walsh coordinated the diplomatic efforts that had proven as effective as military action in expanding imperial territory. Entire species switched sides rather than fight when offered the choice between imperial citizenship and council slavery. The Aquarians who had once voted to banish humanity now sent ambassadors seeking terms for peaceful integration into the growing empire. Dr. Paul Stevens served as chief science officer, overseeing research programs that incorporated technologies from every species in the empire, along with continuing studies of architect artifacts that revealed new capabilities with each discovery. His daughter, Dr. Jennifer Stevens, led terraforming operations that transformed former Council Fortress worlds into garden planets within months of Imperial occupation. The siege of Proxima Gate had demonstrated Imperial military superiority beyond any doubt when Admiral Rodriguez's fleet of 200 ships faced the Council's great armada of over 500 vessels in the largest space battle in recorded history. The Imperial forces used perfect coordination between human tactical thinking and alien technological capabilities to achieve victory that opened the path to the core worlds. Captain Susan Brooks now commanded the super dreadnought Terra's Might and had been present at Proxima Gate when the Council's finest admirals learned that numbers meant nothing against superior strategy and technology. Her ship alone accounted for 12 enemy vessels destroyed, including the Kronak flagship that had once belonged to Admiral Zorthuk before his disgrace at Caldara. The ground war proved equally decisive as General Rodriguez combined human adaptability with the diverse capabilities of allied species to create military forces that could overcome any defensive position. Kardec shock troops provided unstoppable assault capabilities, while Nexus battle droids offered precision and endurance that exhausted enemy defenders, who had never faced such coordinated attacks. Engineer Tony Martinez oversaw the industrial production that supplied Imperial forces with equipment that exceeded Council technology in every category. Factories throughout Imperial space produced weapons and ships using manufacturing techniques that combined human innovation with knowledge gathered from hundreds of different species and ancient architect databases. The diplomatic revolution proved as important as military success when entire Council member species began requesting admission to the Empire. The Zephyrians, whose chancellor had pronounced humanity's exile, now sent delegations seeking forgiveness and offering their crystal-based technologies in exchange for Imperial protection from the failing Council's increasingly desperate policies. Dr. Alan Foster worked with scientists from across the galaxy to unlock the final secrets of architect technology, including weapons capable of destroying star systems and defensive shields that could protect entire planets from any conceivable attack. The ancient civilization's true vision was finally being realized as the Empire brought different species together in pursuit of knowledge rather than domination. Captain Johnny Price commanded exploration fleets that pushed beyond the galaxy's edge, discovering new worlds and species that had hidden from Council persecution for thousands of years. Each discovery brought new allies and technologies that strengthened the Empire, while demonstrating that the galaxy contained far more diversity than the Council had ever admitted. The final assault on Centaurus Prime required careful planning. As the Council's capital station represented both a military target and a symbol of the old order that had oppressed so many species for so long, Emperor Morrison chose to lead the attack personally alongside his closest advisors, who had been with him since the dark days of exile and banishment. Admiral Frank Gibson coordinated the siege fleet, while Dr. Lisa Carter negotiated with individual Council representatives who were ready to surrender rather than face destruction. The battle for the station proved surprisingly brief, as defensive systems that had protected the capital for millennia failed against Imperial weapons based on technologies the Council had thought were safely buried with the architects. The moment of victory came when Emperor Morrison entered the same chamber where humanity had been judged and banished to announce the end of Council rule and the beginning of a new galactic order. The former enemies who had cast humans into exile now knelt before the throne of an empire built from their discarded victims. The transformation of the chamber itself symbolized the change that had swept across the galaxy. where once 12 species had sat in judgment over all others, now representatives from over 50 different civilizations worked together as equals under imperial guidance. The rigid hierarchy that had stifled progress for thousands of years gave way to cooperation based on merit and contribution rather than ancient privilege. President Williams, who had chosen to remain on New Terra as head of the civilian government, transmitted her congratulations as news of victory spread throughout imperial space. The woman who had guided humanity through its darkest hours lived to see the empire that had risen from exile encompass most of the known galaxy. Young Emma Davis now served as a lieutenant aboard one of the newest imperial cruisers and represented the generation that had grown up knowing they were citizens of the greatest power in galactic history, rather than refugees fleeing from those who would destroy them. Her brother Jake commanded a fighter squadron that included pilots from a dozen different species united under the imperial banner. The epilogue to humanity's greatest triumph came 20 years later when Emperor Morrison walked through the gardens of Terra Prime watching human children play alongside young aliens in a scene that would have been impossible under Council rule. The galaxy had finally achieved the peace and cooperation that the architects had envisioned before their destruction. Admiral Rodriguez reported that the last Council holdouts had finally surrendered after 2 decades of futile resistance against imperial expansion and the promise of fair treatment under the new order. The galaxy was united under human leadership, but governed through principles of justice and opportunity that benefited all species equally. Morrison reflected on the journey from exile to empire as he watched the sunset paint the sky above his capital world. They had been cast out by those who believed humanity would disappear into the darkness between stars, but instead, they had illuminated that darkness and made it their own domain where freedom and progress flourished beyond the dreams of their former oppressors.